afternoon. Thanks for joining us across the fence. I'm Fran Stoddard. For this month's Birds Notes program, we're going to travel to South America and the country of Chile to see and learn about some of the birds that can be found there. Joining us from the Audubon Center in Huntington is bird expert and conservation biologist Mark LaBarr. Welcome back, Mark, and thanks for being with us.
Always great to be here.
So you had a chance to make it to the Southern Hemisphere in December. Tell
I,
us about
I
it.
did. I did. I was down visiting my daughter in Chile, where she was there for a number of months, and I got to do some birding. It's always great to go to a place which is very different from where you're used to, and know that you're going to see some things that you've never seen before.
Right. So it sounds really exciting, especially for someone who likes birds and is making lists and all these great things. So fill us in a little bit about what you saw.
So, as with any trip like this, you arrive, and some of the birds that you first see turn out to be the ones that you see all the time. And this was the case for these first two birds. This is a rufous collared sparrow. Now, I saw this coming out of the airport and was extremely excited because it was my first new species. And it turned out this bird was everywhere. This is actually down in Patagonia at about 2,000 feet. You'd find them all over the city, singing all the time. They were basically every time a bird flew and I looked, I'd be like, it's a rufous collared sparrow.
Yeah, nice,
And
nice
then,
blush there on the
yeah,
collar.
they're a gorgeous bird. And then, the other one, which was probably my second bird, was the austral thrush, which is very similar to our robin. And this was another species that I spent time in Santiago, Viña de Mar, and down in Patagonia. And again, these birds were all over the place, singing song pretty similar to our robin, but yeah, the rufous collared sparrow and the Austrial thrush were the soundtrack to my trip.
Awesome. And was there one bird you really wanted to see when you were down there?
I've been to the Boston Aquarium and I've seen penguins, but, they're penguins in a big, aquarium. And so I was really looking to see my first penguin, and I got a chance to go on a trip out to a penguin colony to see Humboldt penguins. And so I was really excited. I was shooting for a penguin, and I got one, and it was a great little boat ride to get out to this colony.
Mm.
We didn't land or anything. We just kind of floated around it and took a look at it. And, the Humboldts breed further north than some of the other penguins. This island had a colony of them where they nested in these burrows, and it was just great to see them up close and be able to take some pics and see how some other colonial birds go about their existence.
So when you say nested, are those little holes? That's where the eggs are, but they don't.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's the burrows that the penguins use, and the young, you can kind of see one there, I think, poking its head out there right in the center,
Huh.
will stay, and they take advantage of this because it's gets you out of the weather and protects you from predation, and
Cool.
of course, they're all kind of packed in on that little island. So yeah, so it was great.
Great. And so what other birds did you see along the coast?
So, I just traveled up and down the coast while I was down visiting, and had some great finds. Came across a rock sticking out off and had, three species, Peruvian boobies, guanay, and neotropical cormorants. And I had to take a look. The guanay is the one with the white belly there and the little tuft on the top.
Huh.
So, I got three new species in one sighting. So that was great.
Awesome. So yeah, they're different from the blue-footed boobies.
They
They're
are, yes, yes. And I've seen those before in Hawaii. So again, a new species to add to my list. Another one that at the same site that was right on the beach where I was viewing these birds was the Chilean Synclodes, which kind of acts like a little sandpiper. It flits around along the water's edge, searching for food. So This was another one that just kind of appeared while I was sitting there looking at the boobies and cormorants.
Great.
And then
So go ahead.
another one that was around pretty frequently, you could see, was this beauty, the Peruvian pelican. And these big birds were pretty common along the coast, but when you got close to them, you really could see the colors in that bill.
Right, really different. So it's so interesting that some species are so similar but different because
Yeah,
they're from a
you
different
know,
place.
little variations from here to there. Um, you know, again, I was birding and I was counting, so I had 83 species that I saw, and that's not a lot considering we can see, 83 on a good day here in, our birdathon. But 71 of those species were new to me.
Wow.
I didn't get up into the Andes to catch all the Andean birds. Maybe that's time for another trip.
But you said that you made it to Patagonia. So what did you see there?
So we went down to Patagonia, to Torres de Pine, and I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that right. My daughter corrected me a number of times. And one of the first birds we saw, which was great, were southern terns. And
Yeah.
these guys, were, very similar to our common terns. They look quite similar. Their bills are slightly different. Um, but it was great to see a turn right off. And we drove from Puerto Arenas to Puerto Natales, and along that drive, fortunately, we rented a car instead of taking a bus, so there were multiple stops as we drove and right alongside the road. Now the wind was blowing both for the turn shot and the southern and this flamingo shot. So
Wow.
trying to keep my camera steady in 20-mile-an-hour winds. So, the flamingos were a great kind of find just off the side of the road.
That's amazing. Is there salt or some kind of little
Yeah,
seed bug or something they're eating there?
it's a kind of a drying up pan of water that they're feeding on there, and you can see them. They're in their classic downward position as they feed, and just a nice pink splash on a rather um, windswept
Hmm,
kind of grassy landscape.
great. So what else along that drive?
So again, you pull into Puerto Natales, and all of a sudden there's these big, huge birds, and you get all excited, and you realize that they're flying all over town. And this is the southern lapwing. Uh, you know, Pretty good size. The size of a crow or raven, and very vocal. But a really great bird to see.
Really
And then
different
when we were in
colors.
Patagonia, go ahead.
Really different colors. I mean, just the patterns on that are so that's
Yeah, it's the contrast is great, and that picture was actually right on the coast in a playground. So these birds were just like walking around town. So it was great.
great.
And then we got a chance to get back into the national park
Hmm.
and do some hikes, and of course, much to my daughter's maybe dismay, I always had my binoculars, and we were stopping. And one of the birds we picked up along with these streams is what's called a torrent duck. And this little guy, spends its time feeding in these fast moving
Hmm.
streams that are leaving the glacier. And so that was a great find as we were walking along. And then on another trip, just driving alongside of the road, sitting on top of a fence post, was this striking bird. And
Wow.
he just sat there and let me take pictures. I'm not the greatest picture taker in the world, but, our meadowlarks here with that yellow belly and that V-shaped kind of neck are nice, but the red on this one is pretty spectacular.
Gorgeous. It looked like he was just waiting for you. He's posing
Yeah,
for you.
it was classic meadowlark behavior there, sitting up on a fence post.
So it's so interesting to have these meadowlarks that look similar but really quite different, and all of that. I mean, it's just so fascinating. But also, are they concerned about being endangered, or are they protected? Did you find anything about, because you do so much of that work here, what's going on down there?
Yes. So, for instance, the island with the penguins is a protected island that only researchers and folks doing studies are allowed to land on with the penguins. Certainly, there were other trips that I could have taken to see king penguins, which, they're also protected. Um, I didn't get a chance to meet up with the folks. Audubon has a program in Chile working with local partners in order to help them protect birds. Um, I didn't get a chance to meet up with them, but there is that kind of work that's
They're
going on there, very similar to what we do here.
awesome.
I was just uh, a bird watcher, which is really nice
Well,
to be able to do every once in a while.
well, and speaking of that, you found a new species to add to your list right up until the end.
So I had a streak of, I think, 14 or 15 days where I wasn't seeing necessarily a lot of birds because I was seeing the same birds, but where I picked up a new species each time. And the last day I was in Chile, I went for a hike in the local park. It was busy, bikers, hikers, and I didn't think I was going to score anything. And then I ended up hearing something and looked up and got this little austral pygmy owl. It was just sitting on a branch over top of all these bikers, making these little calls. And so, right there on my last day before we got on the plane to come back, I got my last species for my trip.
Great get. So let me remind our viewers that if you have a bird-related question, you can pass it along to Mark at the address on your screen, or you can drop Mark an email. His address is mlabarr@audubon.org. Org, that is. Send Mark your questions and pictures, and he'll try to find answers for you for an upcoming edition of Bird Notes. Mark, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your fantastic trip down to Chile and all of the wonderful and very different birds you saw there.
Yeah, birds are great, and you can find them everywhere.
And once again, thank you for joining us across the fence. I'm Fran Stoddard. Stay well.